Option number 1, Mr. Derek Conway.
Number 1, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I have at present no plans to do so.
Mr. Derek Conway.
Mr. Speaker, sir, though disappointed that my right honourable friend can't visit Shrewsbury, is she aware of the long connection between the town and the armed forces, particularly the light infantry depot which used to be based in Shrewsbury and the military headquarters of West Midlands? Is she therefore aware that the personal determination and compassion which she had to demonstrate in order that the statement on war widows upbraiding could be made is very warmly welcomed indeed in Shrewsbury, and she is to be congratulated for that move in policy?
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to my honourable friend. I think honourable members in all parts of the House recognise the very special debt that we owe to the war widows. There is a unique and distinctive case, and I'm very glad that we've been able to offer them this extra help, which honourable members learned of yesterday.
Mr. Bruce Grocott.
Wouldn't the Prime Minister think again about visiting Shrewsbury when she'd have the opportunity of going to Shire Hall and hearing from county councillors right across the political spectrum, from church leaders, teachers, pupils and parents, about the overwhelming opposition that there is to the establishment of a city technology college in Telford. And if there really is £8 million of public money available for education, will she not spend it on the few, but make sure that it's spent on buildings, equipment and books for the benefit of all the children in the town?
Speaker, city technology colleges are a very great new opportunity for young people, a new opportunity. Young people from all backgrounds and all ethnic groupings, and whenever they are open, they prove very popular for teachers, pupils and parents alike.
Mr. Robert Eardley.
Has my right honourable friend ever visited the signal box outside Shrewsbury Station? Is she aware that this is one of an enormous number of listed buildings which British Rail is expected to maintain as part of its normal operations? And would she agree with me that looking after listed buildings, and indeed running its own police force, is an unfair burden on an industry which has to compete on unfair terms with the road transport industry?
Mr. Speaker, I confess that a visit to the signal box at Shrewsbury had not been at the top of my heritage visits, but I now look forward to that experience.
Mr. John McFall.
What do, sir?
Mr. Speaker, sir, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, including one this morning, at which I joined the task force of Westminster residents designed to improve and protect the environment in Westminster. In addition to my duties in this House, I will be having further meetings later today.
Mr. John McFall.
Mr. Speaker, what does the Prime Minister have to offer the 480,000 people who are 2 months or more behind at the moment with their mortgage repayments and face a bleak Christmas as a result of the government's incompetent economic management? Does she tell them to put their faith in her enterprise culture, or would she agree with me that an equally realistic approach for them is to post a letter to Santa?
Mr. Speaker, the latest figures we have about people who are behindhand with their mortgage payments and are in difficulty are that in the first half of this year, the latest full half year, only 0.1% of mortgage holders are in serious difficulty. That means the overwhelming number enjoy 0.1%. That means the overwhelming majority are enjoying the benefits of home ownership.
Andrew Rowe.
My right honourable friend will be aware that a great deal of help is given by this government to overseas countries through the ODA joint funding arrangement. One of the countries which is not eligible for this assistance is Vietnam, and in view of the tremendous need to help that country rebuild its economy to make a home for the boat people, would she be prepared to change that rule?
Mr. Speaker, sir, we are giving some help to Vietnam in connection with the return of some of the Vietnamese boat people, and I think if we were to consider giving any more help, it should be done primarily, in the first instance, through that scheme to help those who are returning to that country.
Neil Kinnock.
Mr. Speaker, what excuse has the Prime Minister got for giving instructions that in the middle of the night, armed riot police raid children, women and men, shove them into caged lorries and forcibly deport them to the country from which they had fled.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I understand from my right honourable friend that they were not armed police. May I also point out that at the International Conference on Indo-Chinese Refugees in Geneva in June, the international community agreed that refugees would be resettled in other countries and that those that did not qualify as refugees would not be resettled and should return to Vietnam. And therefore we returned some of those, as the right honourable gentleman knows, to Vietnam. The people in Hong Kong could not go on taking any more. Many other countries nearby have pushed away the Vietnamese boat people. We have not, and those who are refugees, and there are some 13,000 of them, will not be returned. But it is perfectly in order to return illegal immigrants to their country of origin.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is trying to defend the indefensible. Doesn't she? Doesn't the Prime Minister realize, Mr. Speaker, doesn't the Prime Minister realize that she's the only person in this whole shameful episode that can't make the excuse, I was only obeying orders, for she was the person giving the orders, and the orders are tyrannical.
The right honourable gentleman's remarks are feeble and nonsense. Illegal immigrants have to be returned to their country of origin. It is the custom of international law that such illegal immigrants are received back. It was the people of Hong Kong who were suffering greatly from having some 57,000 Vietnamese boat people there, and more would come when the season came for them to leave Vietnam. It is perfectly in order to return them, and those countries who are protesting at their return would do far better if they offered to take some of them.
Is the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, telling us that she's prepared to see, day after day, night after night, the scenes that people have witnessed in those Hong Kong camps so that she can avoid the responsibility she's got for looking after the welfare of people who are now being returned to poverty and oppression?
Mr. Speaker, it is to help clear the camps where conditions are not good, where fighting sometimes breaks out, where there is disease. Those who are refugees will not be returned home. But I must remind the right honourable gentleman that we have to put back something like 30,000 Chinese refugees over to the border each year, and he cannot go on inflicting his anger on the people of Hong Kong and expecting them to bear the burden. It is perfectly in order to return illegal immigrants to their country of origin. Otherwise, there would be international chaos if they could travel anywhere and never be made to return back.
The burn wells!
Is it not true that the alternative to repatriation to Vietnam is indeed the continuation for years and years, sometimes 9, 12, 13 years, of families living in prisoner of war camps of a temporary and appalling nature, in which those children of the Vietnamese families would have to grow up? Is it not really more humane to let them return to their country and resume their life?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, it is much better. And of course, as I indicated in reply to an earlier question, we are giving some money to the Vietnamese government so that these people can be resettled in the villages from which they came. Our ambassador is monitoring what happens, and we hope sooner or later to be able to involve the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, although the refugees as such are not being returned to Vietnam.
Mr. Paddy Ashdown.
Speaker, but will the Prime Minister, in her busy day today, take some time to reconsider the shameful example set by her government's actions last night in Hong Kong? Apart from the riot police at the dead of night and the blanket of secrecy, what about the appeals tribunals, which condemn those to return to the hands of a communist government, when those people have no rights to attend those tribunals, no rights to legal representation, no rights to judicial review, no rights even to know why the decisions have been taken against them. Does she really think that this is the good example to be setting to the Chinese government, to whom we are going to hand over the safety of our citizens after 1997?
Mr. Speaker, each person who comes is interviewed to see if he is a genuine refugee. Interviewed to see if he's a genuine refugee. He has a right of appeal, and the British Council report indicates how excellent is the system that we operate, and there are some 13,000 refugees. And those countries which have shown anger about it have not yet even agreed to take any of the 13,000 refugees whom we are still seeking a home. It is not possible for the people of Hong Kong to take more and more of these Vietnamese boat people, many of whom are pushed away from other countries, for them to continue to live in camps in what is already an overcrowded island. It is perfectly in order, as was indicated through the Geneva Conference, to return these people to Vietnam and, in fact, to give the Vietnamese government some money to resettle them.
Mr. Conrad Gregory.
Number 3, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I am satisfied with the present arrangements. I know that my honourable friend has long been a strong champion of tourism, which is one of Britain's fastest growing industries. Last year alone, it brought in over £6 billion from overseas tourists to this country. I congratulate my honourable friend on being fortunate in representing a constituency which is deservedly one of Britain's leading tourist attractions.
Mr. Conrad Gregory.
Mr. Speaker, in view of the importance of tourism to the UK economy, the fastest growth industry in Britain, bringing in some £19,000 million, always derided by the Labour Party as a candy floss industry and a Mickey Mouse world, which is on record. Would my honourable friend confirm that responsibility at the present time is split between ministries in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and that the tourist abroad looks upon Britain and Great Britain, and would she re-examine the possibility of appointing a minister with overall responsibility for that important position?
Mr. Speaker, I think, as my honourable friend knows, those who live in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland prefer the responsibilities to be with the territorial ministers. But in fact, my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State of Employment, is the minister responsible for tourism for Great Britain as a whole, as well as for England in particular. And I think that is the arrangement which best suits most people in these islands.
Dr. Godman.
Will the Prime Minister give an assurance that the Scottish tourist industry and the Scottish tourist bodies will retain their autonomy, given the importance of this industry to many areas and islands of Scotland?
Mr. Speaker, I believe that the responsibilities are set out in the Development of Tourism Act 1969, and we have no plans to change it.
Mrs. Marion Rowe.
Would my right honourable friend accept that the agreement in principle by transport ministers to liberalise European air transport will bring tremendous benefit to tourists and all consumers? And is this not the sort of measure with which the community should be involving itself, rather than trying to impose such contentious proposals as the social charter on its members?
Yes, sir. My honourable friend is quite right. It was very good news last week when the European community agreed to deregulating airfares, which meant that we should get very much cheaper airfares to Europe. Hitherto it had cost much more to travel to Europe by air per mile than to the United States. We had been working for several years to try to secure this deregulation. In the past, we'd had to do it by bilateral arrangement. It was ourselves and the Netherlands who were very keen on deregulation. Now it has been extended much more widely, and it will help tourism, and it will bring pleasure to many people who will now be able to fly more cheaply to European countries.
Claire Short.
Number 4, sir.
I defer the Honourable Lady to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Short.
Is the Prime Minister aware that most people in Britain think that our country is now too unequal and too divided? Does she know that the combined effect of all her tax and benefit changes is that the bottom 50% of families have lost £8.50 per week, and that the top 10% have gained nearly £40 per week? Will she now, as many families look forward to a bleak Christmas, give a promise to increase pensions, child benefit, and introduce a national minimum wage so everyone in our country can share in the wealth of the country?
Mr. Speaker, no, I do not agree with the Honourable Lady's figures. She is well aware that people at all income groups have benefited under this government. All income groups have benefited, whether they're on social security benefits or whether they are on earnings, or whether they are receiving treatment under the health service and education. All the benefits have gone up. The Honourable Lady then asks, in particular, the last part of the question, how she actually referred to increases at Christmas for pensioners. Under a Labour government, they cancelled the Christmas bonus for 2 years in succession. Under Conservative governments, pensioners still receive their Christmas bonus.